Christos Anesti, Christ is risen. This is Father Jonathan. I hope you're doing well. If you're watching this video and wondering where the daily reflection is and why is it titled Sunday Scripture with Father Jonathan, unfortunately over the weekend because of the storms I lost power and I wasn't able to record or upload my Sunday Scripture with Father Jonathan video. And I wanted to be honest and faithful to my commitment to you all to post those videos each week. And so so today's video will be a recording of the Sunday Scripture with Father Jonathan's reflection on this past Sunday, yesterday's Gospel reading and Epistle reading. And then starting tomorrow, I'll continue our conversation that we began at the end of last week and on Sunday about the virtues, going through different virtues in the life of the church and the Orthodox understanding of virtue and spiritual life. But for now, I'm going to talk about the Sunday Scripture reading for yesterday. Now, although the Sunday Gospel reading this week is important, I think that we are quite familiar with the story of Thomas and the risen Lord. Therefore, I think it'd be worthwhile for us to glean first some insights from the other reading that was assigned yesterday from the Acts of the Apostles. Now, during the Paschal season, from Pascha until All Saints, that is the week after Pentecost, the church prescribes that we read from the Acts of the Apostles rather than one of the epistles or letters of the apostles. If you were to follow along daily from Pascha until the All Souls Day, you would have read the entirety of the book of Acts during this period. And this is in part to remind us that like those early disciples that we read about in the Acts of the Apostles, we too are the church. And we are called to be as apostles inasmuch as they are. And we are called to share the good news, therefore, of Christ's victory over sin and over death. And this is what I spoke about earlier in the week. Now, reading about the life of the early church, particularly what the apostles did after the resurrection, provides us with a sobering example of how we are supposed to respond to our call as Christians. It will not be easy, but it will be authentic. Now, in the passage that we read this week from Acts chapter 5, verses 12 through 20, we learn that the apostles preached without fear and miraculous things began to happen. I want to touch on one aspect of this reading, however. It is not so much what the apostles did that I want to highlight, but rather what the people who listened to them did. And it is written that as the apostles preached in the city, more than ever, again, this is coming from the Acts, believers were added to the Lord, multitudes of both men and women, so that they even carried out the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and pallets, that as Peter came by, at least his shadow might fall on some of them. And the people also gathered from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing the sick and those afflicted with unclean spirits, and they were all healed. Now, the people's faith was such that they went out not just for some nice words about the end of time, but for real healing. Then and there, they joined themselves to the Lord. That is, they became members of Him, His church. They also had faith that in doing so, in following the words of life that the apostles preached, they would be healed. So great was their faith that they sought even to allow merely the shadow of Peter to fall on them so that they might be healed. We are in a time of pandemic. We are concerned about health and well-being. While there is no guarantee that we will be healed physically through the church, like those who came to the apostles in the book of Acts, or Christ in the gospel accounts, we can be assured that if we live our lives with intention, in accordance with the gospel, we will certainly receive spiritual healing, which is ultimately more important. Our lives will be transfigured and we will be well. The church is a hospital. as I have suggested in anticipation of this week's reflections. If we come to Christ, we will be healed according or in accordance with our faith and his wisdom, his righteousness. The challenge is that we have to make the effort, actually and faithfully come out to meet Christ. We must participate in him. Of course, this means through partaking the sacraments, of course, but it's not enough to simply be there and receive. For St. Simeon, the new theologian, suggests that those who partake unworthily, unprepared, without discerning the body and blood, the bread and the wine, remain bread and wine. And at a time when we're not able to meet Christ in the sacraments in person, we're not able to partake of our spiritual medicine in person, we might consider the ways in which we might go out to meet him while remaining at home. Do we meet him in prayer? Do we meet him in the scriptures? Do we meet him in the love that we have for our neighbor? Perhaps in meeting him in these now, when the time comes to meet him in the chalice, we will do so fully and participate in him fully. In this way, we will be healed precisely the way that he wills, in accordance with his righteousness and his wisdom. That is his divine plan. Please stay tuned this week as we will reflect on the virtues. And as I've already indicated, the presence of the virtues in our life is a sign that we are beginning to be healed of our spiritual sicknesses. And therefore, virtue isn't just something nice that we do or something that we strive for, but it is us authentically ourselves. It is us when we are truly well. And that is what we strive for. One of the primary immediate purposes of everything that we do for healing of soul, and the fruits of that is, of course, the virtues. God bless you. We're here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out. We love you very much. Please continue to submit names for us to read for the evening prayer services. We try to get those read during the day that we receive them at the prayer service that night, and we always read them in the proscomedy on the next liturgy that we have. God bless you. Christos Anesti, Christ is risen.